Welcome to the True Wealth Investors Real Estate Podcast. Creative investing strategies to help you build true wealth. I'm your host, Chad Harris. All right, welcome everybody. Glad to have you back with us, True Wealth Investors Podcast. As always, I'm glad you're listening and would appreciate it if you would follow, subscribe, leave a rating and review. That helps me out, helps me know you benefit from the information and helps other people find us. Today, I am really excited because my good friend, Randy Shelley out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, is finally on the show. We've talked about it for years and finally got it scheduled. So he has a wealth of information on flipping, hard money, lending, how to grow a massive business, how to do commercial real estate, and much, much more. So welcome, Randy. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming.
Yes.
So fill everybody in. When did you get started in real estate? And I know, well, okay, to start, give just a summary of what you've built, where your business is now. What is it you do and what do you hold? And then we'll go back to kind of the start and how you got going.
Yeah, man. So started in 2008. Started out with no money, so I started wholesaling. I had read Rich Dad, Poor Dad before that, and then I had a civil engineering background. Was out of school for 2 years, did not enjoy what I was doing. I'm always kind of the big picture thinker. I was never the detail oriented type. So when they put me in like a cubicle, and it just wasn't what was best for me. So actually heard about Rich Dad Poor Dad book through Dave Ramsey. Was listening to Dave Ramsey at the time. Um, and he had suggested that book, read it, got passionate about going into real estate, got laid off, went into real estate. So, and that's been doing it ever since then. Started out wholesaling. We were originally, I think I had bought like an old Chris Chico course way back in the day. So I started doing postcards, and was trying to find, you could do postcards for people. Back then it was absentee owners who had owned the property more than 20 years. And then you could also do postcards to investors that had bought in the last 6 months. So there was your sellers and there was your buyers list. So started out doing that, made a whopping $6,000 on my first wholesale deal. It was here in Chattanooga. And shortly after that, I was going to a Christian business group for people that was unemployed at the time, and I
Unemployed
wanted out
Christian business.
pretty much, yeah. So from that, I just kind of sold myself in a sense, like I'm going into real estate. I kind of told them what I was doing, and from that, I built a relationship with one guy. He winded up funding me on I bought I bought a duplex first here in Chattanooga. It was 60 grand. I borrowed 65. So he gave me more than I bought it for. I put just a little bit of money into it. And I'm wanting to say each side was rented for $450 at the time when I bought it. And then I think one side was vacant, and I put a little bit of money into just the turn. And so I did a no money down deal on my very first
Your
rental.
first deal.
That was in 2009. So I had done my first wholesale deal in 2008, and then that was in 2009. That same year, bought
Well,
my
was
first
2009 in your market, was it Was the market collapsed at that point? Was it going down, or where was it then?
A lot of fear, a lot of people losing houses, a lot of builders going under, no money. It was really back then, it was really, really easy to find deals, and it was really, really hard to find investor to buy those deals because not a lot of people had money.
Okay.
So, but
So
I mean, go ahead.
yeah, in that climate, I'm just curious about what was your frame of mind? You lose your job, you're in a climate where there's lots of fear, people aren't buying houses, houses are sitting everywhere. What was it that made you think I'm going to go into this full time? And I'm not going to get another job. I'm just going to go into real estate.
Oh, I'm great at this, Chad. Someone tells me I can't do something, I'll work 10 times harder to prove them wrong than right. So one of the best. So there's two like key factors I remember in my life that kind of drove me. Like back when I was in fifth grade, I had a teacher, I almost failed fifth grade, and I had a teacher said I would never mount anything, and it pissed me off. Drove me all the way through civil engineering. Only failed one class in college that was steel design. I retook it, but had an average of 3.2 GPA through college. But it pissed me off, so it drove me through college. So then, when I quit civil engineering, which my dad thought that was a good career and everything else, but I didn't enjoy it. Then I went. He told me I'd never make it in real estate, so that was a great driver. I would have rather died than quit. So
Didn't matter if
essentially,
you enjoyed it or not, you had to succeed in real estate at that point.
correct. Yep. So, but yeah,
What did other people think when you went into real estate full time in the middle of the recession?
I didn't really
Did
listen to anybody else, so it didn't really matter. It was like I was going to make it or I was going to die. Those were the only two options. When you got, I heard that saying, and I've told several people this too: burn the boats. If there's a story, I don't know. I've heard multiple stories on it, but I don't know which is true. I do know the concept is true. You conquistador, let's say, went to South America, and he was outnumbered 10-1, and his guys with him wanted to get back on the boat and sail back to Spain. Well, that night he burned the boats, and then he's like, "We're either going to win or we're going to die." They won.
some
So
serious motivation when there's
yeah.
no retreat, right?
And Will Smith, before he went all crazy, had a saying, I'm not afraid to die on the treadmill. He's got a great motivational things like I'm not afraid to die on the treadmill. I'm either gonna outdo you or I'm gonna die. Those are the only two options. And when you have like that kind of resolve though, seriously, like you overcome you overcome just the stuff that doesn't go right because nothing's ever gonna go right. But if you have that kind of mentality and that kind of, I would say, grit, I'd probably say that's the number one driver in successful people that I see is this grit that they just don't quit. They just keep going regardless of the adversity that gets thrown at them, and they just keep moving forward. So,
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at successful people and say, oh, well, they didn't have the struggles that I had, or they didn't, they were surrounded by people who just thought what they were doing was great, or whatever. They didn't have the doubts and fears. But I think exactly what you're saying. The reality is that successful people had the same obstacles to overcome in the beginning. They had the same fears and doubts in the middle of the struggle. They had the same headaches. It was just that they kept going through it. So, I mean, when I got started in 2013, the Dayton market there were just empty houses everywhere. There were whole streets that were empty. And there was that constant fear in the back of my head, like, what on earth am I doing? Is this really a smart thing to be going full time? I'm buying all these houses. Will anybody ever really want to live in them?
Yeah.
Are the neighborhoods done? But I just constantly told myself somebody in Dayton, Ohio is going to make money this year, and I'm going to make sure I work hard enough to be one of them. Right. So it was up to me. So I can relate.
And then people see you 10 years later, and all of a sudden you're overnight success when
That's
they didn't
right.
see all the
Yeah.
other stuff you dealt
Yeah.
with.
And yeah, they have all of their reasons why it was so easy for me, right? Yeah, that's exactly true.
After my dad said I would never make it in real estate, he then said, "Oh, you're lucky." He didn't see all the, 10 plus years of, just blood, sweat, and tears that went into it. So
Yeah. So what was the next step once you got that first double? Did you just focus on buying rentals, or where'd you go from there? Did you feel
uh
like it
okay, so
was a
let me tell you about that
success?
second double. uh that second one was the flip. I flipped it, I bought it for 60, put about 60 into it. So it was a larger rehab. I wouldn't suggest anybody do that larger rehab on their first deal. And this is why. Put it on the market, got impatient within 2 weeks of it being on the market that I didn't have an offer. Someone approached me about renting it, and I'm like, all right, that sounds like a good deal because I was paying 12% on the money at the time. So that was $1,200, or yeah, 1% a month. So it's $1,200 a month, 100 on 120,000. Uh, I got impatient, put a renter in there for 1,400 a month. 6 months later, he trashed it. My new $60,000 rehab. In my wisdom, I put a guy that I could not sue or go after because he was self-employed contractor. So um, then I was like, I got to get out from under the private money debt. I sold it to my fiance wife now. At the time, we moved into it, lived there for 2.5 years, and after that time broke even. So it, I tell everybody, if you can do better than me on your first flip, you can be successful in real estate. So,
So if you look back on that now, what would you have done if you bought it for 60 and got into it at 60? Would you have just sold it to break even or at a loss or and move on, or what would be the solution
I had put
today?
a lot more money after we moved into it, and that's kind of why I was into it for probably 150. Um, by the time we got it back to where I wanted to live in it. And this is over 2.5 years. I had put more money into it, made it kind of like I wanted it. So it's not that I could have sold it at the time and made money. I wouldn't have made that much, but I could have made money. Just being more patient was the thing, and not jumping, kind of thinking through. I didn't know how to qualify tenants. I had to evict one of the tenants I put into the duplex early on, and that was a learning lesson. And you learn from your mistakes, and you just keep moving forward um, with a lot of this stuff. And my first year in real estate, I went from making pretty good money in civil engineering. I think I started out at like 45,000 a year, made a whopping $14,000 in my first year in real estate, including that $6,000 wholesale deal, and then a few others. And it just, you learn, you just move on, so. But that kind of, over the years from doing that kind of built a great foundation for the stuff that came later, because then, I think think one year we flipped like 45 houses that we were wholesaling and then flipping early on. And then I winded up learning how to raise money, just building relationships mostly. And that led into, we started buying off the courthouse steps as foreclosures. And at our peak of the flipping business, I think we had 36 houses going at one time that we were buying, fixing, and selling. I'd raised about $3 million to support that business and private money, and got totally burnt out in 2008 or 2018 of the flipping game. A lot of stuff in between that happened. Like 2015 was kind of key for me because started a property management company that year. Also bought our first commercial deal that year. We moved into the commercial space. I think we was only taking up 800 square feet of 9,600 square feet commercial space. So I had multiple tenants there. But moved the property management office in there. Oh, yeah, I'm jumping ahead. Like before that, I had sold like 50 houses to one guy in town, like wholesaled and flipped him those houses. Well, then I was doing the property management for those houses too. I don't enjoy property management myself. As
Yeah.
well as I kind of tried to talk you out of it, a while back, and you're kind of moving in that
Yeah.
direction. But I'm just not the most. You need to be more detail oriented with that kind of stuff, and that's just not me. I'm more big picture and getting deals done. But
When
I
you
was
were flipping that many houses, I mean, at your peak of flipping, having 30 deals running at a time, what did that look like? I can't even imagine
so
the
I
complexity of 30 rehabs at once.
had two partners. I got one long term partner that we've been partnered for, gosh, probably 13 years. Um, he was buying off the courthouse steps, and how we got together is I would sell his deals. He would buy off the courthouse steps, and I would just wholesale his deals to another investor because I had a really good buyers list. I'd also
Hmm.
run the real estate investor club here for like 8+ years um, in Chattanooga. So me and a couple other guys started it. Had a great buyers list. And a lot of people would bring me deals and I would just sell their deals to my investors or two. But so I started selling his deals that he would buy off the courthouse steps, and then we kind of partnered up to where we started doing more flipping. And then I was the one that had the vision to ramp it up and kind of go bigger. And we brought another guy on to handle the flipping side. So my partner on the courthouse steps was the acquisitions. I was the raising the private money, and the other partner was the flipping side of it. He was handling the rehabs. Well, he had never done that many rehabs at one time. And when he started going from like 2 to 3 rehabs at a time to where we had 36 going at one time, the system started breaking down from that, as they probably normally would anyway. And the rehabbing is where it suffered. So we went from where we could make about a 50% return on our money. So if we had 100 grand, we can make about 50 grand in profit, and that's typically two flips. So you make about $25,000 each on two flips in a given year. So we went from making about a 50% spread down to about a 15% spread when we started ramping it up. And I saw it where I feel like we were taking too much risk because I was raising all the private money. We were taking too much risk versus the reward of the upside. And I did not like, where things were headed because our margins started shrinking. And like we were, when you start to do volume, you're going to naturally, some are going to be home runs, some are going to be base hits, and then some are going to be strikeouts. So we had a few deals that we lost on. We never lost in a given year overall, But we started where we was, losing sometimes 10, 15, 20 grand on a deal. And I'm like, yeah, this is just dumb. So, um, but yeah,
Yeah, it sounds like a lot more effort and energy and a lot less return.
correct.
So, you and I both raise a lot of private money, and I feel like, looking at the way your business has grown as well as mine, a lot of it was due to the access to private money. You really couldn't have built your business the same way without it.
Correct.
And so, for a lot of people who want to raise private money, I mean, what I always say is if you want to scale your business and build a big business, you really need to learn how to raise private money, because that just unlocks so many opportunities, and freedom within your business. But so many people struggle with where to find those lenders, right? You had a really good real estate network. Did you find most of your private lenders in the real estate space, or were they people outside of the real estate space?
Early on, it was all in the real estate space. It was going to it was running the RIA. It's Here's the thing. It's mainly about relationships more than anything. Um, One of the guys that has brought most of the money to me, and it's not necessarily through him, but it's through people he knows, used to own a title company, and he retired, and he's been a great source for me to raise a lot of other capital just of people he knew. And I've got 15 plus years now of a track record of paying people back when I say I will, and just there's never an investor that hasn't got paid back from me over the years. That's the biggest thing, is doing what you say you're going to do. And there's a lot of people that try to get around that, and they get either greedy, or they get in situations where they're going to lose money, and then they hurt their relationship forever, and ruin it often by not doing what they say they're going to do. And that is the biggest thing I see. If you want to ruin your reputation, just do a few deals and don't do what you say you're going to do with them. And I found, doesn't really matter. I've told my private lenders I would rather pay you before I paid the bank, because the relationships are more important. And I've never not paid a bank either, but the relationships are more important to me than banks are, because even relationships at banks are important, but they change over all the time. I don't know how many transitions I have went through with banks, local banks, over the years, but at least 10 plus. So you can have a great team at a bank, and the next year they sell out to another bank, and it'll be a completely different, like, thing to deal with. But I found
Yeah,
over the years with private lenders, those relationships are invaluable.
yeah, that's awesome. I think that's probably the best tip on private money, somebody could get. And I know for me, even if I'm in a situation where I don't need the money and I don't have a deal ready, I'll still provide an investment for that lender because I want them to be happy and I want to build that relationship. And this is a long-term thing, much beyond any one deal or two deals, right? So, yeah,
And
that's
even,
key.
I mean, we had that 3 million on the street, and we were losing, some money on some, sometimes we had home runs, and it would be awesome. But then those strikeouts where, you lose, like, let's say 5 grand, but then you got to pay 10 grand in private money, cost for the holding cost. It's just cost of doing business. Um, and that's what kind of, that over time compounds though too, because if you, like, right now we're paying between 9 and 10%. It depends on where you're at, with me. And sometimes we pay 15%, but that's usually in riskier deals on second positions and stuff like that. But the compounding effect is interesting too, because usually you can divide whatever interest rate you're paying somebody by 72, and if they reinvest that money, that's how many years it takes to double their money essentially. And it's interesting because over the years, that money gets a lot bigger. If they're not spending it, most of the
Hmm.
investors I deal with don't need the money to start out with. So they're not spending the interest every year. So it's just compounding on itself. So then it kind of gets bigger and larger almost every year that they're willing to invest with you. And it's kind of a great cycle of things that go on. So like if you get a 10% return on your money's going to double, I think every 7.2 years. So then every 7.2 years, you're going to, if they're still invested with you, you're going to have double the access to that amount of money with the same investor.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So
So do you following that model, do you pay them the interest every year and then they reinvest it, or do you like to let the interest accrue into the investment? How do you structure it?
it depends, but I would say typically no, you need to pay it out every year. And that's only due to the fact of something can compound into something bigger, especially when you get into large numbers, it can compound pretty quickly. And there's a lot of people that's turned into Ponzi schemes that didn't necessarily intend, they had a good direction beforehand, and it can compound outside of where you can afford to pay sometimes. I see there's some people we know um, that offered returns that didn't make sense. It was like a 50% return per year, and that usually throws up my bullcrap flag.
Holy
Uh,
mackerel.
and
Yeah.
it turned into a Ponzi scheme. Um, and it's interesting how sometimes the intent can be good, but you can either do it by paying too much interest and over promising, um, or you can just pay a very good return compared to other things, and pay it out every year. I prefer to pay it most of my stuff every year. I haven't always. Sometimes I will compound stuff, but it's usually never goes over 2 years. The only things that might get compounded is when I'm like doing a large storage facility, and at the very first you got a lot of stabilization, and then once it's stabilized you can go and refinance and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I'm real similar. There's situations where in the short term it makes sense. Maybe that lender is like really low loan to value. And so that would, by it accumulating, it goes up to be the full investment value, something like that. But yeah, it has to be short term. That's sharp.
yeah.
I mean, 50%, I've always thought when I talk to potential lenders, the higher the interest rate I offer, the more risk they see in the loan. So it actually, as I've lowered the interest rate, it's been more, I have higher success rates. So, and I think they see it as a more stable investment, which they
And I would
should,
love, I would
because
love
then
to
your
get it
loan
down.
payment's lower, right?
I would love to get even my 9% down, but I deal with pretty high sophisticated investors. The guy that owned the title company especially, um, so they know what a lot of times they can get money, the return on investment. And it always depends. Mine's usually in and out. Like, so 2018 was when I pulled back. I completely kind of shut down the flipping business, even though we kept doing it, but did it completely different after that. We still kept buying a few off the courthouse steps, but I started using other people to partner with, and they flip them. And my responsibility of flipping pretty much went way down. in 2018, and that's kind of when so I split off with some partners. The one partner that was doing most of the flipping, and we kind of I decided then I didn't want to go that direction, and I kind of completely changed the direction I went. So I started a hard money lending company where we were just lending to other people. Already knew that business extremely well because I had done hundreds of deals that we bought, fixed, and sold. So I was already kind of geared up to do that business in general. And I was sitting on $3 million of private money that once we started to stop the flipping, I couldn't invest it. So I pretty much rolled that over to a hard money lending company and started moving in that direction, as well as we started doing larger stuff. That's when we kind of ramped up and started doing larger apartment buildings, and we started doing larger self-storage facilities. So
Yeah, I mean, you exploded in your investing. It's like once you made that transition, looking at your timeline, it's like, man, things took off. That's pretty exciting.
yeah, I had like 30 rentals at the time, just single families. And we went from that in probably 2018 to where, we got 600 doors of multifamily now. And we've got, actually, it's more now. It's over 1,200 doors of storage because last week, we just bought another storage facility that we bought a warehouse that we're going to convert over to climate control storage. So, but yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, one thing we wanted to talk about was kind of, I mean, everybody, I think, in the back of their mind thinks that would be amazing to make the jump from single family, which is pretty easy access into that. The numbers are fairly easy to understand. The money's simpler to raise. The numbers are smaller, and they would love to make the jump to the commercial apartment self-storage, right? And the scale or the ability for those deals to scale your business are amazing. But I think the numbers become more complicated or just scarier when you're adding multiple zeros. So
Yeah.
what what's your process for how do you run the numbers on a commercial deal? Last week you were looking at self-storage and ready to close. What's that process like?
It's similar to single family rentals in this sense. And this is kind of how I judge if something is a good deal or not. There's something called the 1% rule. Probably a lot of older investors that's been in the game for a while understand that very well. Essentially, I think what is it, 1% of the total cost of rents per month, which is essentially if you've got, let's say you're into a house for all in for 100 grand, that better rent for $1,000 a month. And that's what I would consider the 1% rule. That I never go under that ever. That's like the base of where you should be. Essentially, what that does, it gives you a 12% gross return on investment. And typically on something like that, if it's a cash on cash return, half of your gross is going to get eaten up just in expenses. Then this is over the long run, not the short run. You can always beat this number in the short run. But in the long run, if you consider roofs, HVACs, all that stuff over time, typically about half of your gross income is going to go to that. And that's a very conservative number. But I've found that that's the number typically it's almost always comes out to.
So
So
if your expense ratio is 50%, right, half of your gross income you're going to eat up in expenses long term. That's just a simplified ballpark NOI, right? That's
right.
including everything, vacancy, maintenance management, everything to operate that property. Okay.
And that's how I'm looking at analyzing deals overall. Like I don't trust any realtors or anybody's NOI number. all I really care about usually, what's the gross income? Cut that in half. What's the debt service? And can I get paid at least $200 a door per month is a great way to run it. It's a great way to run at least multifamily numbers. If you can meet those criterias with multifamily, it's usually a pretty good deal. Because you want to at least probably cash flow to $100 to $200 a door minus the debt coverage is a great way to analyze multifamily. Storage
That's
is a
awesome.
little storage is a little bit different, but very similar too. If you can meet those numbers with storage, you're doing great because storage has a lower rent per door than multifamily does. So it kind of might skew those numbers, but if you can meet that with storage, dude, that's a freaking smoking good deal. But
With self-storage, are you running the same expense ratio, or is that skewed? Is it still 50% over the long term,
I
or?
typically they say 36 to 7% in
Hmm.
storage because you don't have HVAC, toilets, that kind of thing. So it goes down a little bit, but if you want to stay conservative, just make it 50% across the board. So because that is a very conservative number and you'll usually always come out um pretty good if you run those numbers across the board. So
That's sharp. That is, I mean, if you just run it that way, it is very different. It's the same as running the numbers on a 4 unit, really. I mean, it- it's not as complicated as you would think. So, how do you do your due diligence, and is there any complication on, let's say, 100 unit apartment complex figuring out deferred maintenance as compared to a 4 unit? Is the due
sure, but
diligence very,
I
very
always
much
figure
different?
that in the due. I always figure that out once it's under contract. I don't worry about that until it's under contract. Like literally, if I can get numbers to match my criteria, and that's like gross income minus 50% or divided by two, and then figure out what the asking price is on that debt service and figuring that out and those numbers work, I'll make an offer and then figure out the other stuff.
So you've got your offer, or is that a letter of intent, or is that just a?
Are you dealing with a realtor or not?
So okay, so if it's listed, that would be the process.
Oh my gosh. Some commercial agents are ridiculous to deal with, to be honest. Uh, I'm the type that's just going to make an offer.
Okay.
I don't like the letter intent game. And this is not how big commercial deals work, just FYI. You're supposed to go through this whole process of letter intent and this long process of going back and forth with a commercial agent, and it's dumb. Um, the faster you can get to an agreement with a seller, the more likely you're going to get a deal, period. I feel like. So I don't like letter of intents now, and this is not for everybody, and this is not how most commercial deals go. Because large commercial deals with an agent will typically have a letter of intent. They'll go back and forth, and then they'll make an offer, and then it doesn't really matter till something's under contract. Even when I bought my first commercial building, it was listed for 550. I put it we so I threw out an offer of like 400 and they countered at 500, I think. And then I made an offer for 450 and they accepted and I was like, well, crap. I don't even know how I'm going to close this. But
The classic where you almost feel bad that it was accepted. Like, why did I make that offer?
you're like, oh crap. Oh crap.
Yeah, what did I get myself into?
But I don't know how many times I have thrown out offers, put something under contract, and then figured out how I'm going to close it after the fact. It's almost like jumping out of the plane, building your parachute on the way down. And usually, here's the thing: if you've got access to private money, and you've got more importantly than that, you've got great relationships. Good deals will always attract money if you really look hard for it and you got pre-existing relationships. Good deals, they always attract money. Now you might have to give up on some ownership. You might have to give up too much and in points or whatever, but good deals are always going to attract money. So
Yeah, and I mean, if you have a good deal, you'll be able to find the money. I also think if you raise the money, if you have those relationships beforehand, that gives you a lot more confidence making the offer too. And
it
once you've
does,
funded
but
multiple deals, it helps.
it helps, but then you add everybody's going to get uncomfortable adding a zero.
Yeah, no matter
So
what zero you're comfortable with now.
when I was starting out, 10 grand used to be like a lot of money. 100, then it was 100 grand used to be a lot of money. Then it was $1 million that used to be a lot of money. Then it was $10 million. Well, I passed that, and you come to the point where $100 million is like, oh gosh. So there is a zero that's going to make every. I don't care if you are millionaire, billionaire, even. You just keep adding zeros until there's a zero that's going to make you feel uncomfortable. So
You'll get nervous eventually. Yeah. So, okay, so let's say you get this deal under contract, right? Or the offer is accepted.
well, let's talk
Um,
through a specific deal. What you want to talk about? Apartment, storage, or commercial? Don't matter.
let's go apartments.
All right, apartment deal. In in 2020, we put a package that was listed on the MLS that was 372 units that was on the MLS for $9 million. So that is 372. That is $24,000 a door. Why didn't anybody buy it? Average rent was 450, let's say, across the board. Almost the
Okay.
2%. Almost, actually, no, better than the 2%. Well, at 450, just right under the
Yeah.
2%. And what I mean by so I've took my single family game and just went to a multi-family game, and it's the same game. So single family, so Chad, you do mainly single families. Would you buy a house that for $24,000 that's average rent is 450 a month?
Yes.
Why?
2% is good.
Yeah, but what
Yeah.
is the 2% rule when it comes down to it? And let's to keep numbers easy, let's say that rent was $500 a month, and let's say the purchase price was 25,000. What that is a 24. So if you double the 1% rule, and the 1% rule on that essentially would be, well, I'll pay up to $25,000 for something that's rented for 250 a month. Well, if that monthly rent is double that, it's $500 a month. That's essentially the 2% rule to me. And it essentially it doubles from 12% on the 1% rule to 24% on the 2% rule. So, and that's the gross return, not the net. So essentially, you're doubling your return on investment every time. So there was houses back in the day here in Chattanooga that I was all in for $30,000. Some of those rented for over like let's just say $900 a month. Well, that's the 3% rule, so that doubles again. So that's a 36% return on investment. I very rarely have seen better than that on houses. I have seen better than that on mobile homes. I've
Hmm.
seen up to a 50% return on mobile homes where you literally will make 50% of the money all within 1 year of what you're into it for. So let's say you're all in for 10 grand, you make $5,000 the first year, and then the second year, you pay it off. So with that, it comes down to the return on investment. So I knew based on the numbers, this average rent 450 a month, an average cost per door of 24,000. It was a great deal. Why didn't anybody buy it?
Why?
It was very complicated. Um, Half of the properties was built into this rural development loan that you couldn't pay off. You had to assume the companies, and they limited your return to owner, and it was complicated. Nobody could figure it out.
Hmm.
I put it under contract as soon as I knew about it. I put it under contract. We put it under contract in January of 2020. Then we started figuring out all the due diligence and everything, and it was complicated as all get out. This was right during COVID. Uh, a lot of the government stuff was shut down. So it took us a year. We were supposed to close in March. We closed right before the end of the year in 2020 of December. I think it was like December 28th or something like that. And we still didn't close everything right, but I knew buying at those numbers was a great deal. And so there was a bunch of deferred maintenance. Even though it was $24,000 a door, I got the seller to reduce the price by $480,000. So we actually bought it for 8.6 million. In that deal, because it was complicated, I got owner financing for half of it, the half that was in this RD program that was super complicated. No money down. The other half we raised private money on, and it needed a good bit of capex, which is just improvements to it. But we only raised 1.7 million total to buy an $8.6 million deal, and we did it with debt. I own 50% of that deal. My other partner owns the other 50%, and it's been a great deal over the long run. Now the backside of that is we're locked into that RD program for another 7 years, and we're not really making much on the ones that are in the RD program. But I got into those zero down when we bought it, and so when you're analyzing deals, you look at what's your price per door, what's it rented for, and if you can make those numbers work over the long run of that deal, that will probably, once everything is out of the RD program and we wait it out, that deal will probably make us about $15 million. It'll take, from when we bought it, it'll probably take 9 years, but you just wait it out. And the greatest thing about rentals and the long-term real estate, I'm not talking about the flipping side, I'm not talking about the wholesale side, is the best thing about it is principal pay down, appreciation. That's what makes you wealthy. That's not what makes you rich in a sense of money, because a lot of people, some of the most successful people I know are broke for 15 plus years. and all of a sudden they're overnight success because a lot of their stuff pays off or they refinance and then they got a lot of money, but they live broke for 15 years, struggling, just buying deals, making deals work and everything else. And then, you know, after a certain amount of time with that principal pay down, all of a sudden they got the lifestyle that everybody wants. Like last year was the first year in 15 years in business and I bet you have done this for a while, and I could have done this for a while, I just didn't want to, or I probably did, I just didn't think I could. But I took off for 2 months out of the year, all over the West, Glacier, Yellowstone, all these cool places, took off from my business for 2 months and didn't even think about it. And
Yeah.
because I hired people, my hard money lending company grew during that time. And it's weird, you work for so many years and you're building, building, building. And then one day you look up and you're wealthy all of a sudden. So, but yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, very few people get an opportunity like that to travel with their family. Much just be able to travel, much less know that their business is still growing and they don't have any money issues while they're gone. And that's a huge blessing. So, and our kids are only in that window for so long,
I've
you
heard you
know.
got those magic ages from 6 to 12. And 6 is where like your kids are just so fun asking you questions all the time. To 12, they still want to hang out with you. And how old's your oldest, Chad?
My oldest is 17, 17,
Uh, I don't know if
13.
this is true. You can tell me because my kids are, 6 and 7. Uh, After 12, they might not want to hang out with you as much. I don't know. That might not be true across the board, but it just kind of changes.
Yeah, for me, we haven't seen that. They still, I mean, they love hanging out. We have a great time together. But after 12, they have their own activities. So you try to
Sure.
schedule a big trip, and they've got this sporting event going on and this thing with church and a mission trip. And yeah, it's just that the schedule gets a lot more complicated. So, but I found our kids, we just spend a lot of time together and like talking and sharing life, and that hasn't changed. So
Yeah.
you got many years ahead, man.
Yeah, man. And the
So,
greatest thing, like the keys to your success is what has all that building got you over that amount of time. And one of the things for you is your farm is, you can look back to all those years of building. It gets you to one thing that you really enjoy with your family and that you like. I was able to do that too. We bought 160 acres a year and a half ago. I think you're enjoying your farm more than I am, but I'm gonna put some more money into mine. I'm gonna try to enjoy it more. But I think I was talking to my wife the other day, and I was like, well, I could build out this exactly like I want it. And she was like, well, what would you give up? I was like, well, I could sell off my single family rentals and be fine. And I mean, you can always change your income situation to put yourself in a situation where you get what you want regardless. And one of the things that I wanted a year ago was to travel, for 2 months. And we went a little bit higher end than you did as far as the Class A RV and everything else. But what's the point of building up all this time if you really don't enjoy it too? So
oh, 100%. Yeah, I'm definitely of the camp that in the end, right, my last day, nobody's going to care how many deals I did or what my portfolio was worth. They're going to care about the adventures we shared together and the laughter we had. And those are the stories we're going to tell and talk about. And hopefully they tell their kids about. And um, so, yeah, the business is there to support all the good things in life. Right.
yep, yep,
So, yeah. And I know. I think we were both similar in that the early years we just put our heads down and worked, right? And didn't know how it would all work out. It was just do it, do it, do it. And then down the road, you look up and you're like, wow, this worked out really well. I didn't didn't really
Overnight
know how it would
success.
all pan out. Overnight. Yeah. So, would you have a piece of advice for somebody just getting started? I know everybody getting started, they worry that it's the worst time to get started. The market's too hot, or the money's too expensive, or whatever the current complaint is. What piece of advice would you give for somebody just starting out?
Start. Plant your flag. Burn your boats.
Oh, I like it.
I mean, there's no secret. It you learn stuff all the time that will help you build tools. I've heard tools in a tool belt, essentially, and the more tools you have in your tool belt, the more things you can do, and that's very true. But that's not the key to somebody's success. The key to somebody's success is just start. So I've got a buddy down in Macon. Um, his kids are a good bit older. They're 15 and 16. And I would highly encourage this with your kids too. Um, I was pretty much talking to them and they was like, we want to go into real estate, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what are you waiting on? And they was like, we're 15. We can't even drive. I was like, why is that an excuse? So, and then, everybody in life makes excuses of, or they put something into the future of one day, or I can't because dot, dot, dot. Doesn't really matter what it is. They put an excuse, and and a kid does the same thing. Well, they're like, "Well, I can't even buy a house until I'm 18." Yeah, you can. You can figure it out. There's ways to do it. You put it into a trust. You get your parents to sign off on it. There's tons of ways to do it. Looking back, I think I would encourage anybody, the younger that they can do it, the better. But the second option of that is today. Plant your flag, burn your boats. I'm gonna make this happen or I'm gonna die trying. Period.
Yeah,
There's no,
man. Awesome.
I think that grit, that resilience is what's gonna make people successful. It's not the it's not that, well, I got lucky because I found blah blah blah. It's the showing up every day, improve yourself, read a ton of books, and take action, because I see the people that are successful versus non-successful that even are even passionate about real estate and wanting to go into real estate, because I ran the RIA for years and I saw all kinds of people come through there. And the difference of the people that were successful versus the people that were not successful is that grit and the other part of that is taking action. So I tell people all the time, if they're not succeeding in real estate, comes down to how many offers have you made in the past 30 days? And that's it. Because they're like, well, I don't even know what a deal is. Blah, blah, blah. They start immediately, they start making excuses if they haven't made offers. They'll come up with every excuse in the world. But then I'm like, well, and they was like, oh, I don't even know what a deal is. Well, you're going to learn what a deal is if you go make 100 offers, especially if you get something under contract and you find out it's not a good deal. Just have an inspection period in there and back out if you back out before you find out that it's not a deal. But there's so many times in life, you just swing for the fence and put something under contract and figure it out as you go. And if it's not a deal, you can get out as long as you got an inspection period.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think there's a lot of benefits too to just being around other active investors with the same
That's true.
mentality, because we
That's true.
can convince ourselves of all kinds of excuses, right? And it takes somebody else looking at from the outside and say, calling your bluff and saying, no, no, no. You just need to take more action. That's not a valid reason for you not to move forward. So
Like his kids, 15 and younger. And I'm like, I'm all challenging the middle one who's like 9 or 10. I'm like, why aren't you beating your brothers and sisters? Why aren't you making an offer? Like I'm only 9. It's like, well, I got school, I got soccer, I got all this other stuff. Guess what? When you're adult, other things are going to come in too. There's no excuse why a kid that's underage can't take the same action an adult can, because it's the same thing. It's like, well, I don't know enough. Well, that's the excuse that a lot of adults make too.
yeah. Yeah, no matter what the age, if you're looking for a way, you can find a way. If you're looking for an excuse, you can find an excuse, right? It's going to come down to what you want.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
taking action.
awesome.
And taking
And
action.
taking action. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's the secret. That's it.
That and the
So,
resolve, the grit. Because here's the thing, challenges, um, you know, the Bible says if you got faith of a mustard seed, you can move the mountain. I believe that's 100% true. A lot of people don't really count the resistance that comes with that. And I feel like a lot of time God tests your resolve to how bad do you want it. So, and if you keep praying, you keep moving, you keep trying, you keep showing up. I've seen where over time, if you continue to do that, you keep making offers, you keep trying. I don't think there's any way you won't succeed. And here's the thing, some people might succeed way more than other people. And that's fine. You don't ever try to compare yourself with somebody else's success, but let that be a driver to you to know that you can succeed too. Like so early on, I partnered with some other guys that we had a wholesaling business, and that's when we were wholesaling about 45 deals a year, and we split about the time in 2009. So it was early on. So I got with them probably 2008, and then late 2009, about the time I bought that first flip, we split. Um, and every time they used to shoot out a deal, it used to fire me up to like, well, dang, if they're succeeding, it used to fire me up. It was like the best motivation ever, because you can look at, other people succeeding as like, wow, I can't get ahead. I can't, they got lucky, blah, blah, blah. Or you look at it
real
like,
easy for
well, if they
them.
can do it, I know I can do
Yeah.
it. So, and I'll never forget going early on to Chris Chico's event. And I like Chris Chico a lot. I saw a guy that couldn't speak English extremely well. He made 500. He was talking about how he made 500 grand that year in direct mail. And I was like, I got a civil engineering degree, and I was probably a little cocky. The older you get, the more you don't know. But I was cocky at the time. It's like, I know I'm smarter than him. The only difference is he took massive action. Massive action. And that was the reason why he was successful.
That's awesome. Well, I know I'm feeling fired up. I hope everybody else listening feels fired up, is ready to take massive action towards whatever your goals are. So, Randy, I know you and I talk a lot, and we could go on and on and on. But I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time to share your story and give the insights on how to run numbers on apartments and bigger deals. Um, I'm excited to start looking at more of those. So, for people who want to find out more about you or are in the Chattanooga area looking for funding, how do they keep up with you?
So Mission Funding Capital is my hard money lending company now, and it's also the fund that we started a debt fund. where if you want to invest with us and you're a accredited investor, and you got $250,000 or more to invest, we've got a debt fund that we offer 10% if you want an annual payment. Or they can just call me 423-665-5555. They're welcome to call me. I try to help people. There's a guy that just started an awesome meetup group. I ran the RIA for years, and there's a guy that just started a new meetup group, and it's kind of cool to start hanging out with some newer investors again. That's kind of wanting to improve their lives and move in that direction. It's always good once you've been in real estate for a long time. It's kind of good to see the passion again that younger people have to invest, and try that they're thirsty for knowledge, and they don't know the best direction often to take action, but they're full of spit and vinegar, and it kind of gets you fired back up when anybody that if you can help somebody and they improve their lives from the knowledge that you give them, there's a great satisfaction in life that comes from that. So if I can help other people do that, it's great. The opposite side of that is where you try to help people, they take no action, they take no responsibility for their lives, and then they point and blame why they're in the situation they are. That's like what drags the life out of you. And unfortunately, that's why I shut down the RIA 5+ years ago, is the negative people were outweighing the positive people, because the realistic side of it is most people will never take action. Most people will get all fired up and then it'll fade, and they don't have to push through the resistance, the stuff that's going to come to anybody, that they won't push through that, and then they'll point and blame why their life is the way they are. And I can't stand that mentality. I love the mentality that's like, plant the flag and burn the boats, and I'm going in this direction. You put the blinders on, and this is what I'm going to do. Because the pretty objects, there's so many different ways to make money in real estate. The jumping over here, I'm going to wholesale, I'm going to flip. And I did it too. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And a lot of those people never do anything. And, now it's okay to try a few things, but put your blinders on and just move forward. So advance.
Yeah, well, I know for anybody, if you want to reach out to Randy, he's a authentic, genuine guy, has a servant's heart, wants to help people. If you are one of those people with the motivation and ready to take action and want to help yourself, he's a good guy to talk to and a great resource. So thank you again, Randy, for coming on. Always appreciate it. Always enjoy talking. And everybody listening, always appreciate having you. We'll catch you next week for another episode. Until then, keep building your dream life one door at a time. We are adding new episodes every week, so make sure and subscribe and check out all of our content at truewealthinvestors.com.